Good morning, everyone. You are listening to the Daily AI Show live on LinkedIn and YouTube. It's Monday, August 5th, and we're launching into August as the public markets crash around the world. We're thinking about how can we find solace with AI? Well, you can talk to AI. It's empathetic. And you can ask it to do almost anything to support you through this difficult period. The subject for today is how to iterate on prompting with a concept that has been coined by one of our mentors, Rachel Cook, as an MVP prompt. Now, the MVP in this context stands for minimum viable prompt, or minimum viable product. And what this is alluding to is that you don't need to have a really complete and internally consistent, excellent prompt to deliver to the AI in order to begin to get some good output from it. So on our tagline on today's show, we're saying if it's good enough to, if it's good enough to do, then do it with like incompleteness. What is the phrase?
If it's worth doing, it's worth doing badly, right?
There you go. Okay, right. Well, I'm going to correct that by saying it's worth starting badly. The subject of today is all about conversational dialogue with the AI. Because an important point here is that while we have this model of prompt and then response to prompt, every single such exchange that you add in a live interaction with an AI is added to the context. And so you can progressively add information and requests to your series of prompts in order to refine and zero in on what the best possible output is. So we're on the cusp as a bunch of AI enthusiasts of a time when conversational model with AI is going to be much more relevant because of the advancements in the voice mode that the AI models are being trained with. Before, the voice interaction was basically just repeating whatever the text was, without much attention to the nuances of spoken word that you can have when you use a live audio interaction with a live voice and audio interaction. You speaking to the AI with your natural, imperfect sentence formation and inflection and ideas spilling out into the thing. Well, that's going to be a part of the conversation now going forward because of the capabilities of the AIs that are just now being delivered to the market. So whereas we have this concept of structured prompts, which has a very sort of formal structure and needs to include X, Y, and Z, and we can talk about those things. We have a master prompt instructor with us today, Beth, who's has spent a number of her life years working on prompts now, and has also taught courses in prompting. Is an acknowledged expert, so I'm going to turn a lot of this over to her. But I'm basically spewing here as an example. If an AI were listening to me right now, it would by now have at least understood, as you probably do, what the whole picture is here that I'm talking about, which is you can start a conversation either in text or in voice with an AI as a prompt, and then you can get a response and then say something else, and by twists and turns get to a very good result, which you can then capture and retain as a prompt. So with all of that, this is the way humans speak. It's not the way AIs necessarily speak, but they're getting to the point where they can understand this kind of drivel. Okay, to you, Beth.
Okay, so I'm going to add to that this is also something that people experience when they're sitting down to do something and they're like, oh, I need to write a prompt for it. And so one of the techniques, as Andy said, is to just start a conversation, right? Like, write me a LinkedIn post. That's a bad prompt, right? But it's going to give you something back. And now you have something to react to, right? Oh, write me a LinkedIn post without delve or those sorts of things. So the idea is that don't get stuck ruminating on what your prompt should be before you engage in it. The other piece of this is that there's a whole lot of information about how to write a good prompt. But let's agree that the definition of a good prompt is one that works, right? Like you're not being graded on how closely you connected to the structure that you were taught, or something that worked for 4.0 that is that was really necessary, because the higher the higher parameter, the higher level of reasoning, the more you're asking it to do higher reasoning pattern matching. Whereas if you're working with Sonnet or Haiku, which are Claude things, or 4.0 or 4.0 Mini, and then Gemma over on Gemini's site, they are more based in pattern matching. So this show, like we showed you a little bit in the AI Studio show, the way that I work with a prompt to ask and refine things by letting it give me a bunch of things, my editing that, and then my like rewriting history for the AI and saying, look how good you did. Excellent. Let's do that again with the next thing, right? So you can build it that way. That happens a little bit more in the back end, which is the playground, the AI Studio, the playground for OpenAI, AI Studio, or console for Anthropic Claude. What Andy is also talking about is refining it through conversational, just like, hey, I have this. And you've all heard me say, I think, but my favorite way to do that is literally to have it elicit the information it needs out of me in order to give me the result that I'm asking for. And then, so I will say, hey, I need to write a LinkedIn prompt, or I have an idea that I would like to present to my team. Ask me questions about it. Right?
Absolutely. That's like my primary method as well. Well, you know, after you introduced that to us collectively, like a year ago, that was it's worked wonders for me when I've had to come up with something, especially if it's a subject I don't think I have mastery over. You know, if I don't have a lot of background, it's the best way to get caught up. It's like, hey, I got to talk about this thing, or hey, I've got to develop a process for X, Y, or Z, you know, marketing, or, you know, advertising, or business strategy, or anything like that. And I really need to just work through my ideas. And I'm a bit of a conversationalist myself. I like to talk. I like to, you know, throw ideas out there, get call and response and all those kinds of things. And that really gets the gears going. So having AI there as, you know, as the whiteboard, or as the partner to voice that back to me, it helps tremendously. And so you can start from literally nothing and then end up with something. And I think there's a couple of key milestones as part of that process that people can use as a takeaway. Number one, like I said, there's you can start from zero. You can literally just have you could use a keyword to just get the process going. You know, like you said, LinkedIn post. All right, cool. I want a LinkedIn post. I want a TikTok post. I want a YouTube post, or whatever, you know. And from there, you'll start off slow. You'll see, oh, this is not exactly what I wanted. I want more this. And then it changes it. And then it's like, oh, I want to go in a different direction. Okay, then it adds more to that. It's like, oh, I need it to sound more You know, it has to have this kind of tone, this kind of voice. And when people talk about adding your brand voice or having examples, right, doing that few shot method, this is what they're talking about. It's like, oh, here, I want it to sound like this post. I need it to sound like, you know, like this article. This is the voice from the text that you're working with. And once you get to the final result, then you just ask it, what is the prompt that's going to get this kind of result back? And then it'll tell you what it needs to know to get that. And then you practice with that prompt. Now you have a fleshed out prompt to ask it so that you get back to that end result. And of course, it'll need some more iterations working on it and whatnot to finally get it to where you need it to be. But once you go through that process, then you have your MVP. That's what you can use. And as long as that can consistently get the output that you want, then you're good to go, I think. Yeah, I think that
I really like those ideas that you guys put out there. And one of them, the one you offered, Beth, which is to have in effect, have the AI interview you about what it is that you're looking for, which is very capable of doing. That's not very natural for me because I've kind of built my life and career around being good at instructing people on what it is that they need to do next, right? And so my approach has always been to try to write the magnum opus, not the MVP, but like build the whole thing out. And I've been accused rightly of being way too verbose in emails, et cetera. Like people are like, no, just give us the bullet points here. I don't want to have all the flowery language. Well, but that's really, really important to understand when you're interacting with an AI is that it not only can it explore for you what it is that, by just asking you questions with a simple prompt as Beth described, but then as Junmi's pointing out, once you've had this dialogue with the AI, it's retained all of that. And now you can say at the very end, okay, write me a prompt that is optimized to get this final result as if this was the original prompt. Like we're not building a document in the course of the dialogue. We're just having an exchange. But now we want a final document that's going to be saved by you as the human and made available for repeat use. And the structure of that prompt is well within the ken of an AI's intelligence. You're on mute.
That's because I'm typing in the chat and I don't want y'all to hear me type in the chat. Terribly sorry. Come join us so that I can type to you in the chat as well. Now we need to just remind ourselves also that where it seems like you're having a conversation because you're having a whole reasoning kind of thing, the AI is giving you the most probable response back. So when you say, now give me the prompt that will generate this, it's giving you the most probable response to that. Ideally, that is the accurate answer. But the fact that you've asked for an accurate answer doesn't mean that it's giving you the accurate answer. So after you do that, what you want to do is go to a clean new prompt window, put in the prompt that it just wrote for you, and like add your whatever you're asking it to do about the topic, the program that you want written, whatever that is, and see if that functions, right? So I think often what we do when we're doing this process is we're like, oh, phew, right? I got the thing. I just wanted the one thing. I got the one thing. Now I'm asking for the prompt. But you don't actually know that it works until you use it the second time, not being influenced by the conversation context that just happened.
Testing. Yeah.
Testing.
Yeah, absolutely. You got to test it in different environments. I also find that it's helpful to test in different models as well. Because not all prompts are going to work exactly the same, within the same model, let alone the other models. But being able to test across models to get the kind of result that you want, if you can find a prompt that's going to at least direct you into the way that you're a path that you want to go, one model might be better than the other. Like, everyone on the show loves Claude 3.5 Sonnet, because it gives a much deeper or rich response, especially on creative writing and those kinds of things. Now, I think it's worth pointing out the basis of the show is the MVP prompt, right? I think Rachel's tweet was essentially said, just start. Don't worry about being perfect. That's the essential bit of the tweet. But I think it's also important to identify whether there was any prompts, and this is a question for both of you. If you've had any experiences where you've just come up with a prompt and it was good to go and you never had to tweak it. Now, me personally, I've had to tweak it every single time. I think these prompts get more elaborate for the kind of response that I'm going for, I don't think I've gotten it right off the bat and it's given me something that I think or thought was, oh, this is perfect. I don't need anything. I don't need any more. And so I'm just wondering from the both of you, have you had that same experience, or have you knocked it out of the park with that initial prompt that you created?
So I have prompts that I go back to, but there is an additional step that I do that's sort of similar to what Andy was talking about, which is I like to be able to give it a template within the prompt to fill in. So once I get like, hey, I like this as a description of a product. Let's analyze that. Let's go back and forth. What are you as AI seeing? What could I ask for? Then like, okay, so now I've written my sense of the product description. Compare them and critique them so that I know like what it's seeing from the one that I'd like to get close to. But then after that process, I work with AI to give me like, okay, so that first sentence, which I put in little squiggly brackets, single squiggly brackets, that first sentence is a hook, right? This is the hook to grab the user's attention. So it's a provocative statement. So then provocative statement about product is what I put there. And I go through that. And it may be like provocative statement about product or provocative question about user's experience, provocative statement about product, and then 2 sentences, right? Like 2, still in the squiggly brackets, 2 sentences that blah, 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 blah. That's the next step that I like to do because that gives me more consistent results. So okay. I make sure that we're on the same page with the AI conversationally. I then do some analysis on what that means, how AI is referencing that, what that could be called for an AI. Again, this is AI's most probable response for me. AI is not like your mother saying, if you want that, this is what I want you to ask. Right. And that's an agreement between 2 people. That's not an agreement between you and the AI, but it is a little bit more of a clue. And then I test that template. Those are my longest performing prompts, are the ones that I've templatized.
So I want to talk to this whole subject and what you're bringing into the point of discussion here is there are some prompts that you do just on the fly and you're looking for something that you don't know or think you'll probably ever use again. And then there are others where you're actually trying to build something that's going to be reusable. And I want to use the context of custom GPTs as a way of illustrating the difference between a conversational approach to prompt development and a structured approach. And if you've never done it before, it's worth going into the custom GPT framework that OpenAI has provided. And there you have 2 different modes of building a custom GPT. One's called create, I think. I forget now. what it has been a while since I went in and built custom GPTs. And the other one is giving you the full sort of panel of all the different configurations that you can, assign to this custom GPT as part of its overall instruction set. And in there is an open block for the instructions. And that's where you can build out very carefully in a detailed and formal format the instructions in a structured way. But by contrast, you can use this MVP approach in the other one that's been offered from way back when. Approximately what month were custom GPTs launched? Do either of you have a recollection of that? It seems like it's coming up on a year that we had.
So they were announced at Dev Day, which was November, maybe November 6th. I have no idea why these dates stick in my head. And they could be wrong. But then they came for real a couple of weeks later. I think that was one of the things that was announced.
Okay, so 3/4 of a year or so we've had access to custom GPTs, a really useful, model of application development. And there's this way that they help you. The AI helps you build out the instruction set for itself by doing a dialogue with you. You just give it a general purpose instruction, like Beth was offering. Like, I want to build a poem generator for people to use. And it's going to ask you a question back. And that builder or builder create, I forget what the terminology is within custom GPTs. I never look at the labels anymore. That goes through a process. And what's happening behind the scenes is everything that happens in that dialogue is being stored in the knowledge of that custom GPT as its instructions. Now, if you've done it that way and you jump over to the panel, there's just 2 tabs, you jump over for the same custom GPT to the instruction panel, what you'll see in the actual instruction block is just a very spare, generalized description of what that whole dialogue was about. And so you can't really edit the instructions as detailed as they were in your ongoing dialogue where you said, oh no, I want to have this happen when the user does this. That's not going to be printed out there in the instructions, but it's behind the scenes. It's been captured. And that's true of when you're doing a real-time interactive conversation with a frontier model as well. But you can also capture this process of conversational exploration to get to what it is that you want to have done in a custom GPT in a way that that's all saved and kept in that custom GPT.
It's true. Yeah.
Well, I was just gonna pose a quick question for anyone who hasn't been really following along. I know Justin, Jen, and Cisco are probably all old hands at this by now, but since we're talking about MVP prompts, what would be both of your look at or takeaways, maybe shortcuts, I guess we could call them, for getting up and running? We've already talked about the conversational side. For me, and this kind of goes to what you were saying, Beth, I like to have the template or framework. So if you've heard of that terminology, a framework is essentially a template that you can apply your information to, right? The act as, you are, here's the context, here are your examples. So another correlation for terminology is few shot. That's just talking about examples, right? So having a few examples, 3 to 5 examples, and that usually seems to work for most of the foundational models out there. And then just working or building on from that point. Do you folks have some key tricks or tips, I guess, that were like, oh, if you're just starting out, if you just use these 2 things, you will shortcut a lot of the learning curve?
So I'm going to do 2 tips. One is, if you have not gotten into the back end of things, look for it. You can interact with Gemini's AI Studio with a Gmail address, or a Google address, right? Gmail address, and for free most of the time, right? So unless you're asking a ton of stuff, the free plan is fine for that. So that's one place to do it. You're not like normal people, sorry, like non-dev people, let's say it that way. If you're not a developer making something that you want a ton of people to use, the free levels, or the cost of interacting with what is essentially their API, you just have a sandbox or a user interface to be able to do that if you're not someone who can code something that for yourself that would let you interact with the API. So Google Gemini is free in that context, and they have a docs link that tells you what they think you should do for prompting. Those are really good options. Claude Anthropic has a cookbook, and OpenAI may also have a cookbook. That's a dev term, which basically means this is what we found worked, right? These are some examples of that. The second thing is even more delightful, which is the backend of Claude, console.claude.ai. Pretty sure that's the answer. That's the thing. It has a write a prompt for me. And the prompt that Claude writes is actually pretty good for the other ones too. Cisco asked about using hashtags and sections. What sections really does for the AI is say, okay, so this under here is either I'd put hashtag space, which would be the equivalent of my top heading. This is heading 1. This is the most important thing, right? And then if you do 2 hashtags with a space, now that's heading 2, right? So it's not quite as important. It's a subset of heading 1. That's what those do, those hashtags do. Anthropic and Claude prefer you do it in what are called XML tags, which define a container. So this container is instructions, got a greater than symbol and a less than symbol on either side, right? So then inside it says instructions, and then you give your instructions. And at the end of that, when you feel like that's done, you put a backslash, a forward slash, this slash, and then instructions, right? So that closes the container. You open the door with the first piece, which doesn't have the slash in it, and you close it with the second piece, exact, but now it has a slash. Those are really helpful in defining for AI, which is a tech, right? It's trained on human conversation, but it's actually trained on human writing. Now it's being trained on human conversation. These are helpful containers.
And it's also trained on code. So one of the underlying capabilities of the AI is to understand the sort of rigid structural annotation of code languages, many code languages. So using XML tags or using the markdown method is basically speaking its own language in some respects. So it's useful. Now I'm going to respond to Junmi's question about, structures and formats that are, these methods, shall we say, that have acronyms. And it seems like in the course of 2023 and early 2024, everybody who was an AI influencer out there and working in prompt engineering offered their own acronym. They wanted to trademark that for the structure that you needed. Now I'm going to sort of distill it as I've distilled it in my own mind to what the main elements of that are. And I think that you can do that in just natural language, sentences within a paragraph, or you can give it the structure by adding the markdown and or XML tags to separate these and tell the AI that this sentence that I'm going to write now is about this part of this format. Now that format starts out with, the AI has an enormous volume of learning. and it's captured somehow magically in all of these hidden layers of the deep neural network. And what you want to do is focus the AI on that area of its knowledge that is most relevant to the task you're asking it to perform. And that's assigning the AI a role or act as. And so the first element of this structure is to give it a persona. Give it a, like, you are, if you've ever seen it in one of these, it says you are a helpful assistant. That's the simplest one. Act as a helpful assistant is the very simplest and most broadly defined assignment of a role to the AI. The next one is to provide some context about the task or ask that you are giving. So I call it context, but that's confusingly similar to the whole use of the word context in AI, which is everything that the AI is given in order to operate its inference and give you a response. So I'm going to, for this, the purpose of this one, and not to be confusing, I'm going to say the ask. So you've got assigned the role, and now you're going to give it the ask. What I'm asking you to do is to do this. That's the next one. The third part of it is constraints. What are some of the limits or shapes that you want to have the output take? And then you can add, so that's three of them, right? The role, the ask, and the constraints, like make it short, use simple language. These are constraints. And then you can give it express instructions if you want to. And those instructions, as we've learned over the course of time, happen best when you use examples. So here's the instruction. You're going to, produce an output that has three elements, and it's going to, I want you to add this X, Y, and Z to it. And now here's an example of an output that has X, Y, and Z in it. And that's kind of the instructions that allow you to shape the response along with the other sort of elements of that framework. That was the word I was meaning to use there that you used, Junmi. Frameworks for prompting.
Right.
Yeah, and just to quickly reiterate and go back to what Cisco's question, I think the frameworks and the tags and whatnot, that structure goes to help far more with automations. So prompting instructions where you're trying to recreate the same kinds of results consistently, the frameworks and the markdown and the hashtags and or the HTML tags and things like that. That all really helps when you're trying to create an instructional prompt that's for automation. Because you really need to dial in, because it's very important that you get the same kind of output or the same structured output consistently. So I think that's it helps overall, but I think you really do need to use it when you want to try to create a prompt for automation. Yeah.
So I'm gonna push back just slightly and say what is working, right? So again, we're saying like these are some things that you can use to get started. But if you have a prompt that has examples that says, write me something like this, and then this equals example 1, example 2, example 3, example 4, and it gives you write me something like this on topic, right? And then you have examples, this equals these examples, and then topic equals pool cleaning, and it works for you. That's the structure that's working. It's not a bad prompt because you didn't tell it what role it had, right? So, and it's not a good prompt because you did tell it what role it had, and it looks like a perfect prompt. And that's the idea of the MVP prompt, right? MVP comes from most viable product, right? Like, so what's
Minimum.
the minimum,
Yeah.
minimum viable product, so that it's the minimum that gets the job done. What we're saying in this is that actually, if it works for you, that's excellent, right? That could be the MVP. It could also be the, what is the other thing? The most, but I don't know. Maybe I said it right? Maybe it is the most viable prompt. If it's working for you, that is that's the answer of whether it's a good prompt, of whether it's a successful prompt.
Yes, I think what you mean is the fully featured prompt. So minimum viable product is the restrict down to the features that are the most essential to capturing the essential value proposition of whatever your product is. Similarly, for a prompt, the minimum viable prompt is here's the skeletal outline of what I need, but I may have some other constraints and additional instructions that I want to use, or add in order to get to the fully featured prompt that is full of structure. And so I think that that's a great way of capturing that you're in the process of building something out to a valuable tool that can be reused.
Right. And again, I think we're saying the same thing, just slightly differently, but I want to put the emphasis on that when it is fully featured, that is determined by the fact that it did what you wanted and it does it without any other context of the conversation. You can pull it out and plop it somewhere. That's the fully featured.
And examples help with that.
Examples are key. Like, you can potentially get a fully featured prompt with examples. Again, like the fully featured prompt really may just be, do it like this, please. And then with examples, right? Or again, like a simple, write me a LinkedIn prompt.
Yeah. I want to just, as we
write me a LinkedIn post. Sorry, it's Monday.
as we wrap up here, I just want to mention that from the very earliest days, indeed within custom GPTs, there was and both inside custom GPTs and outside a tool called Prompt Perfect, which was using an AI to help you write the prompt. So you don't really need to learn all these things. And Claude has added this, build a prompt kind of feature function set. So use the AI, and that's what the conversational dialogue is doing. And the AI can not only do that through a conversation, but it can also take a simple, sort of minimum expression of what you're looking for and generate a prompt that is fully featured. And then you can start to iterate and refine that fully featured prompt and save it.
So we're not going to go deeper into it, but I just want to mention Cisco is talking about writing prompts that go through prompt drift. So they work and then they stop giving you quite as good results, and then at some point it's just not the way to do it. This is actually one of the reasons that fuse shot prompting becomes so important, because what is happening often with prompt drift is that the words that are being used to elicit the response start to shift in meaning a little bit. They have a little bit less zing to them maybe over time as updates get made. But in general, examples are examples, right? Like that, that's one of the reasons that's really helpful. Justin also said, yes, absolutely. He has designed a prompt that tells it it's a PhD AI scientist, prompt engineer on the level of Jan LeCun. We love Jan. It rates prompts from 1 to 10, gives feedback, and then iteratively approves it until it scores a 10, which is just brilliant. So that's the do-it-yourself version. And the other options are cookbooks and the console of Claude. Those are my two favorite. Yeah.
All right. Well, thanks everyone for hanging with us on this fundamental show, which is fundamental in the sense that our conversations with AI are done through prompts. And this has been an exploration of what the basics of prompting are. If you want to learn more, talk to Beth. She's got a whole course for it. Anyway, come join us again tomorrow. I don't know exactly. I don't have that up and running, but
Denmark. What is Denmark doing that they're winning at AI? Because in the studies that are international, Denmark is like one of the benchmarks that people hit.
They're happy people. That's why they're happy to work with their AIs. All right. That's the end of the show today. Check us out at thedailyAIshow.com and sign up for our newsletter there. You'll enjoy it.
Aloha.